Good afternoon. So I just thought to do this quick video, and it will probably filter into 2 videos eventually, just so that I don't have too many things in one video and I lose you. But there are 2 things I've been thinking about for a while now, and recently some things that happened today in church, and then another one that happened while I was on a trip some days ago came up again, and I thought it made sense for us to even discuss it, to know what your thoughts are around the 2 things. Number one is, we say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to help us become better people. We used to have a culture of accountability that seems to have eroded over time. Now, I will just share the story first, and then I'll talk about what it is I want to highlight. So one of it is the subject of how to hold one another accountable to what the institution of marriage should be. That's one. Number 2 is, or maybe it's fidelity that I meant to say, how to hold one another accountable to standards of fidelity or standards of chastity in relationships, in marriages. And the second one is how we raise our children as a community and as people. So recently I was away on a vacation, and it was a solo trip. And when I say solo, there were a number of people who were on that trip, but solo because it was only me. My husband wasn't there, my children were in there, so it was just a holiday for me. And so while on the trip, on one of the tours we went on, so it was a group tour, different people from different hotels came on the tour bus, and then we would go to different locations. And so on this particular day, we had a couple who were Nigerian, and they would be like in their mid-50s or 60s. And so we went to a site, a location, and it was a good place. And so this couple saw what I was wearing. I was wearing an African prints, and they got fascinated by it, and we started talking. And from their accent, I could tell that they were Nigerian. And so we got talking, and it was the woman who initiated it, and she said, "Oh, you Nigerians, you guys, carry your culture with you wherever you go." And I said yes, that I noticed, and I mentioned that I noticed that their intonation, their accent was also Nigeria, and I got interested. And so they told me that they were Nigerians, but they live in the US, and you could tell that they were in their late 50s, and they seemed like they were a cool couple. They looked like friends, and so we had a great conversation. And for them to have made that trip, they were also comfortable. And so as we were speaking, we started talking about where I grew up. The woman told me where she grew up as well. Coincidentally, we grew up in the same environment, even though she was way older than I am. I didn't know who she was. Same, I grew up in Ibadan. In the 2 places where I lived in Ibadan, she also grew up in those places. She went to one of the schools I also attended. And so we had a good time talking and chatting. And her husband also interjected while we were talking. And he also told me, at some point he also, spent some time in Ibadan as well. He did some education in Ibadan, and that was it. So it was a friendly conversation. Fast forward to another site that we went to. We were standing outside, so it was just me, them on another side of the hall, and then some other people were in different locations in that place. And the wife made to leave where she and her husband were standing, and she walked away. I think she was going to get something. And so while she walked away, shortly after she left, I felt it in my heart. I knew the man was going to attempt to make it pass at me, and I was properly dressed. I'm going to show a picture of what it is I was wearing on the video. I was properly dressed, so it wasn't like I wore anything that attracted him. And so he walks up to me and he says to me, and he whispers, from a distance, and I could see the way he was looking. It was sneaky, because he waited until his wife stepped far away from sight before he walked up to me. And he said to me, and he could see my wedding band. I was wearing my wedding ring, and he said to me, "So is it only Singapore you visit? Do you visit the US also?" And the way he said it, you can tell when someone is making a pass at you without necessarily saying anything. I acted like I wasn't hearing, and I was scrolling through my phone. And I said, excuse me lady. I ignored him. I said, "Do you also come to the US as well?" And he was whispering it because a few other people were around, but he whispered it because he didn't want them to hear. And so that minute I just said to him, "Excuse me, sir," and I walked away, walked off to where other people were. And so I could tell from his face that he looked awkward. And so, one of the things that came to mind was when we moved from that side to another side, I felt a strong nudge to go tell the wife, because it was just so irritating that you would spend time coming on a vacation with your wife, a getaway, and while you're on that getaway, you have the audacity to make a pass at another lady. And it said a lot to me, spoke volumes to me. And so for me, the subject of this video is, how do we handle things like this when they happen? One of the things I have said to my friends in particular is, if you ever find me in a compromising position, call me out. If you can't call me out, tell someone who you know can call me out. And please feel free to report to my spouse. I don't have a problem with you telling my husband what it is I've done wrong. Because if I decide that I want to get married, I decided to get married, the onus is on me to respect my marital vows, respect the God that I serve. And so if I decide to be silly and I go out of the lines of what the marital vows are, and I say, anyone that sees me, please feel free to report to my husband. And in the same way, I tell my friends, I said, if you see my husband in compromising situation, please tell me. I know a lot of people say, oh, they don't want to know, I don't want to hear any evil, I don't want to see any evil. And I've also heard instances where people tell their friends what they saw and it became an issue. And I hear that people say things like, oh, they'll use it to settle their fights. And so I wonder how we're building a culture where marriage that is supposed to be pure, undefiled before God, has now become an institution where anything goes. You find, it's so bad that at some point, I heard this story about, a man that was caught in a compromising situation, and, the friends of the wife were the ones who saw him, and they called him and they said, are you not even, worried that we're going to tell your wife? And he said, tell her if you want to tell her now. You will be the reason why she's in pain, or you'll be the reason why she's devastated. And I'm wondering, where has the sanctity of marriage gone to? Where has fear for God gone to? Do the vows that we say on our wedding days make any difference? Okay, let's even say you do not even get married in church, or you do not have a civil wedding. What does marriage even mean to us? And it becomes clearer to me that a lot of us don't even understand what it is that we're doing when we say we're getting married. We get married just to procreate. I'll share another example, maybe two more examples. One time, I was in Abuja. This was maybe about 3-4 years ago, to renew my passport and to change the name. No, I think it was more than maybe about 5-6 years ago. So it's been a while. And so, because I did that name change many years ago, and so I went on that trip, and I remember that when I was on the flight back to Lagos, you know how the flight will land and then the plane lands and everyone stands to go out. There was some hold up at the entrance, and so many of us were standing on the line. And so I noticed this man who was sitting on the seat before mine. And because I was standing, I could see what was going on. So I turned this way and I noticed that he was chatting with a lady and he was deleting every chat. And it wasn't like I made to look at his phone, but I just noticed that I turned and I noticed that he would chat, he would delete, he would chat, he would delete. And in my head, I'm wondering, why are you chatting with someone and you are deleting the message? It was later, just as we were disembarking. At this point, he was now directly in front of me standing, and he was doing the same thing over and over. Like for every message he types, he would delete, he would clear it. And it just turned my spirit upside down. And I know we say, let's mind our business, but you see, this culture of minding our business is what has gotten our society to where it is today, where people don't have any fear of consequence. People, they don't have any fear of consequence because they know that even when people see them, nothing will happen. Their spouses cannot do anything, and even the people who see them will just say, it's not my business, let them face their marriage. And so as we disembarked from the plane, I was so restless. I was so restless in my spirit. This man was also somebody in his 50s and 60s as well. I was so restless. I kept feeling that nudge to go walk up to him and speak to him. I was wondering, why will I go and do this to someone I don't know? If it's someone I know, it's easy. I can do that. But I felt so restless. Every time I tried to walk away, I was walking away, I kept feeling that note too. It was a strong pull to go back. So I went back to the man and I tapped him. I said, good evening, sir. This was in the night at about 8 p.m. Good evening, sir. And he said, oh, young lady, how can I help you? I said, I'm fine. And so I told him, I said, okay, I have a word for you. And he said, what is this word? And I said, I noticed while on the plane that you were chatting and you were deleting the chats. God wants me to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. I have a sense that you're probably married, and that's why you are deleting those messages. God is not happy with those behaviors. And as I said it, I felt relief. I'm not saying it in the exact words, but it was basically just, calling his attention to the fact that what he was doing was wrong. And immediately I said it, I ran off. I ran off into one of the buses that was waiting to take us from the tarmac. And so when we disembarked from the bus, I started walking fast, walking quickly to catch up with the cab that came to pick me. And next thing, I heard footsteps behind me. The man ran after me and he tapped me and he said, hi young lady, can I have a word with you? And so he said to me that, okay, so one thing I missed when we were having that conversation, he said, so you were looking into my phone? I said, no sir, I didn't have any intention of looking into your phone, but I guess God wanted me to see it. And as I was talking to him, I was looking at him straight in the eye. And so I think that boldness was what disarmed him. And he said, oh, thank you so much. And so when he walked up to me the next time, he said, thank you very much. He now said to me very sincerely, I hope that's what it was. And he said to me that, oh, I'm so sorry that you saw that. Today is my wedding anniversary. I actually would have, missed my anniversary because I was going to meet another lady in the hotel room. And so that the message he was sending and he was like, man, his wife is his world, his wife is his everything. He gave me his card and he said, please, I should keep in touch. I just saved him, that he's born again, his family is born again, and that he would have made the biggest mistake of his life, but I saved him from it. Whether that is true or not is inconsequential. But guess what? I did a research on his name and I found out that this man was a politician. He had contested in one of the governorship elections. So imagine that this is something that someone else saw and it became a subject of blackmail for that person. Another instance, someone who I know, his wife went abroad to have a child, and while she was away, what he was doing was, he was sleeping around. And so one of those days I saw him, my spirit couldn't let me. I told my husband, and I told my husband that if you don't address this, I'm going to have to address it myself. So I told my husband, and my husband said, oh, if you want to address it, go and address it, but that he won't put his mouth in another person's business. And I said, no, it's our business, because this family is our friend. They are friends. And so I will not be happy seeing that something like this is happening to a family that is dear to my heart, and I cannot do anything about it. And so I prayed about it, and I walked up to the man on one of those days, and I said to him that I saw you on XYZ day, this is what I saw, and I don't think it's right. I think it's disrespectful to not only God, but to your family and to us who are your friends. Of course, he was shocked. He didn't expect. I'd never been that confrontational with him before, and he probably didn't know that I was that. I could be that bold, and so I'd like to believe that it was the boldness of God. It wasn't just me speaking. And so I spoke to him and he said, oh, he was going to work on it. Whether he worked on it or not is a different ballgame. But long story short, where I'm going to is, how do we handle things like this when we see them? Do we look away? Do we address them? Do we, do we just pray for them and just let it go like that? What is our role as Christians? What is our role as a community? I'd like to know in the comments. Thank you so much.